Maya Thompson, known for her compassion and dedication, is a highly respected leader in the medical field. Her journey began humbly, working tirelessly as a nurse before ultimately rising to the esteemed position of medical director at one of the most prestigious hospitals in the city. Maya's path to success was far from easy, shaped by the challenges of growing up in a low-enterprise neighborhood. Surrounded by limited opportunities, she refused to let her circumstances define her. Instead, Maya's upbringing fueled her determination to pursue her dreams and create meaningful change in healthcare. From her early days, Maya displayed an unwavering commitment to improving patient care and fostering a sense of teamwork among staff. Her nursing career was just the first step toward her larger goal of breaking down barriers and making a significant impact on the healthcare system. Over time, her expertise, work ethic, and empathetic approach earned her promotions and the trust of her colleagues. As medical director, Maya remains grounded and deeply connected to her team, often stepping into scrubs to support them during busy shifts. She believes true leadership lies not in titles, but in understanding and supporting those you lead. This philosophy, rooted in her experiences, drives Maya to work toward a more inclusive and equitable workplace for all healthcare professionals. Despite her prestigious role as medical director, Maya Thompson stayed humble and connected to her team. She was often seen wearing scrubs and stepping onto the hospital floor during busy periods, a testament to her belief that no task was beneath her. Maya understood that effective leadership required more than holding a title. It demanded empathy, collaboration, and first-hand knowledge of the challenges her team faced. One of her primary goals was to transform the hospital's rigid hierarchy, where nurses and support staff were often treated with less respect than doctors. Maya believed that every role was vital to patient care, and worked to foster a culture of mutual respect and teamwork. Her actions and philosophy not only inspired her colleagues, but also began to chip away at deeply ingrained attitudes within the institution. Dr. Samuel Reed was a highly skilled surgeon whose reputation for medical excellence was well known throughout the hospital. Patients admired his precision and expertise, and his impeccable track record made him a sought-leader practitioner in his field. However, among the hospital's staff, a different side of Dr. Reed was more familiar, a man whose arrogance often overshadowed his talent. Samuel carried himself with an air of superiority, firmly believing that doctors were inherently more important than other healthcare professionals. This belief was evident in his interactions with nurses and support staff, whom he often treated as inferior. For Dr. Reed, respect was something that flowed upward, reserved only for those he considered his equals or superiors. He rarely acknowledged the contributions of those beneath him in the hospital hierarchy and frequently barked orders without so much as a please or thank you. His colleagues, particularly the nurses, endured his dismissive tone and condescending attitude daily. To Dr. Reed, teamwork meant others simply following his instructions without question. He dismissed differing opinions as a lack of confidence, convinced that his judgment was always correct. While his patients might never have noticed, the staff viewed him as a symbol of the hospital's rigid hierarchy, a talented but deeply flawed individual who perpetuated a culture of disrespect within the institution. Dr. Samuel Reed entered the hospital ward in his usual brisk manner, his focus entirely on his packed schedule of surgeries and consultations. To him, the staff bustling around the ward were merely part of the system nurses whose job was to follow his lead without question. Among them, he noticed Maya Thompson, dressed in scrubs and busy reviewing patient charts. To Dr. Reed, she appeared to be just another nurse, someone beneath his notice. He didn't recognize her, nor did he take the time to ask who she was. Irritation crept into his voice as he approached her, barking orders about updating patient files. His tone was sharp and dismissive, reflecting his assumption that she was unimportant in the grand hierarchy of the hospital. Maya, focused on ensuring the accuracy of her work, looked up briefly, acknowledging his presence with a polite nod before continuing her task. This seemed to further provoke Dr. Reed, who demanded to know why she was standing around and not following his instructions. Maya remained calm, her professional demeanor unshaken by his condescending words. She responded measuredly, explaining that she was adhering to standard protocol and that the files would be updated shortly. However, her composed response only fueled Dr. Reed's frustration. He dismissed her explanation with a wave of his hand, raising his voice as he accused her of slowing down the workflow and failing to meet the hospital's standards. The other staff in the room exchanged uneasy glances but remained silent, unwilling to intervene. Dr. Reed's public berating of Maya created a tense atmosphere, and while his words stung, they also revealed something deeper. His assumptions weren't just about her role as a nurse. They were laced with the unspoken biases that often permeated the hospital culture. He saw her as someone who didn't belong, not because of her abilities, which he didn't bother to assess, but because of his preconceptions about who deserved respect in such an elite institution. Despite the humiliating nature of the confrontation, Maya maintained her composure, determined not to escalate the situation. Little did Dr. Reed know that the woman he had dismissed so easily was not only his equal but, in many ways, his superior, a fact that would soon come to light. Despite the sting of Dr. Samuel Reed's sharp words and public dismissal, Maya Thompson stood her ground with quiet dignity. As the condescending remarks echoed through the ward, she felt the weight of the moment, not just for herself, but for what it represented, a culture of unchecked arrogance and bias. Maya could feel the eyes of her colleagues on her, their silent discomfort amplifying the tension. However, she refused to let the humiliation define her reaction. Instead of responding with anger or defensiveness, Maya took a deep breath, centering herself. Her calm voice carried authority and experience as she replied to Dr. Reed's accusations. "I'm following standard protocol, doctor," she explained, ensuring that her tone remained professional and measured. "The files will be updated shortly." Her response, though respectful, subtly highlighted her competence, a contrast to the baseless assumptions Dr. Reed had made. But Dr. Reed wasn't interested in explanations. Waving her off dismissively, he raised his voice further, accusing her of slowing things down and lacking urgency. His words carried a sharp edge, laced with frustration and condescension. Maya could see the frustration in his eyes, not born from any actual error, but from his perception of her as someone unworthy of his time or respect. The other staff in the room stood frozen, their unease palpable. Junior doctors looked on, unsure whether to intervene, while nurses exchanged glances, their sympathy for Maya clear. They had seen Dr. Reed's behavior before, but this time it felt different. There was something about the quiet way Maya handled the situation that struck a chord. Maya, however, remained unshaken. She knew that reacting emotionally would only reinforce the prejudices underlying Dr. Reed's behavior. Instead, she focused on her work, methodically checking patient charts and ensuring everything was in order. Her actions spoke volumes, projecting a calm confidence that contrasted sharply with Dr. Reed's heated outbursts. The silence that followed his tirade was heavy, but Maya carried on as though nothing had happened. Her composed demeanor, far from being a sign of submission, revealed her inner strength. She wasn't merely brushing off the insult, she was choosing a higher road, one that reflected her belief in professionalism and integrity. As the confrontation came to an end, the staff around her began to see Maya in a new light. Many had already respected her for her work ethic and leadership, but witnessing her poised response to Dr. Reed's unfair treatment deepened their admiration. They saw not just a skilled professional, but a leader who embodied grace under pressure. For Maya, the incident wasn't just a personal affront, it was a reminder of the challenges that came with her role. She knew that moments like these were opportunities to lead by example, to show her team the power of composure and resilience. Little did Dr. Reed know his dismissive treatment had not only failed to diminish her, but had further solidified her as a figure of quiet strength and unshakable dignity in the eyes of everyone who had witnessed the exchange. As the whispers spread through the hospital corridors, the true identity of Maya Thompson sent ripples of shock and discomfort among the staff, especially those who had witnessed the earlier confrontation. What many had assumed was just another nurse, unfairly berated by Dr. Samuel Reed, turned out to be none other than the hospital's medical director. The realization hit like a lightning bolt. Those who had observed the interaction felt a mixture of surprise, guilt, and unease as they recalled how they had stood by in silence, unwilling to intervene. For Dr. Reed, the news arrived in fragments. A passing comment from a colleague here, a raised eyebrow there. At first, he dismissed it as mere chatter, too focused on his busy schedule to pay much attention. But as the day wore on, the whispers grew louder. By the time he learned the full truth, that the woman he had dismissed so rudely was not only his equal, but his superior, his initial irritation gave way to unease. He replayed the encounter in his mind, the sharpness of his tone, the dismissive gestures, and the pointed remarks. The weight of his assumptions began to sink in, and with it, the realization of his mistake. Meanwhile, the hospital staff were abuzz with discussion. The nurses who had worked alongside Maya that day felt a renewed sense of admiration for her. Many had already respected her for her leadership style, one that emphasized humility and teamwork. Now, seeing how she had handled Dr. Reed's outburst without revealing her true position, they saw her in a new light. Her composure under pressure, coupled with her choice not to escalate the situation in the moment, spoke volumes about her character. Junior doctors, too, reflected on the incident. They had often felt caught in the crossfire of the hospital's hierarchical culture, where the opinions of nurses and support staff were frequently disregarded. The encounter between Maya and Dr. Reed became a stark illustration of the biases that permeated their workplace. Conversations began to shift from private grumblings to more open discussions about the need for change. The hospital leadership wasn't immune to the fallout. Senior administrators were quick to recognize the significance of what had occurred. Maya's role as medical director had always been one of quiet reform, focused on fostering an inclusive and respectful environment. This incident, however, brought the deeper issues of bias and inequity into sharp focus. It wasn't just about Dr. Reed's behavior. It was about a culture that allowed such behavior to persist unchallenged. As the story spread, it became clear that the confrontation was more than a personal clash. It was a catalyst for a broader reckoning within the hospital. Staff began reflecting on their own attitudes and behaviors. Nurses recalled moments when their expertise had been overlooked or dismissed. Junior doctors thought about instances where they had hesitated to voice their concerns out of fear of backlash from senior colleagues. Even custodial staff and other support personnel shared their experiences of being treated as invisible by those higher up the hierarchy. Maya, meanwhile, maintained her focus on the larger picture. She had no intention of seeking personal retribution against Dr. Reed. Instead, she saw the incident as an opportunity to address systemic issues within the hospital. She began drafting a report for senior management, outlining the broader implications of the event and proposing actionable steps to foster a more equitable workplace. Her recommendations included mandatory bias training, regular evaluations of staff conduct, and the establishment of channels for employees to safely report instances of discrimination or mistreatment. Dr. Reed, on the other hand, found himself in an increasingly uncomfortable position. As more people learned of his misstep, his usual confidence began to waver. Colleagues who had once admired his medical skills now looked at him differently, their respect tempered by the knowledge of his behavior. Nurses who had long endured his condescension felt vindicated, though they refrained from openly celebrating his discomfort. As days passed, the hospital leadership took decisive action. They called a meeting with Dr. Reed, Maya, and other senior staff to address the incident and its implications. The meeting was tense, with Dr. Reed initially defending his actions by framing them as efforts to maintain order and efficiency. However, when Maya spoke, her calm yet firm words left no room for misinterpretation. She outlined how his assumptions about her role had led to his behavior and highlighted the broader patterns of disrespect and bias that the incident represented. Her words carried the weight of not just her personal experience, but also the collective experiences of countless staff members who had faced similar treatment. As Maya spoke, Dr. Reed's initial defensiveness began to crumble. The room's silence was a stark contrast to the bustling hospital outside, each word she spoke resonating deeply with everyone present. Following the meeting, the hospital leadership implemented Maya's recommendations, beginning with mandatory bias training for all staff. The training sessions were designed not as a form of punishment, but as a step toward creating a more inclusive and respectful culture. They address topics like implicit bias, effective communication, and the importance of valuing every team member's contribution. Dr. Reed attended the sessions alongside his colleagues. While he initially approached them with skepticism, the discussions and exercises began to open his eyes to the impact of his behavior. Over time, he recognized that his actions were not just isolated incidents, but part of a larger problem within the hospital's culture. This realization marked the beginning of a transformation in his approach to leadership. For the staff, the changes were immediate and noticeable. Conversations in break rooms and hallways shifted from hushed complaints to open discussions about how to support one another and build a more collaborative environment. Nurses and junior doctors felt more empowered to voice their concerns, knowing they had the backing of leaders like Maya. Maya's handling of the situation earned her widespread respect, not just within the hospital but in the broader medical community. She began receiving invitations to speak at conferences and leadership summits, where she shared her insights on fostering equity and inclusion in healthcare. While she valued these opportunities, Maya remained focused on her role at the hospital, determined to ensure that the changes she had initiated would take root. The incident, once a moment of humiliation, became a turning point for the hospital. It sparked a cultural shift that improved not only the work environment, but also the quality of care patients received. Maya's quiet strength and commitment to justice transformed a painful experience into an opportunity for growth, leaving a lasting impact on the institution and everyone within it. The atmosphere in the conference room was tense as the hospital's senior leadership, including Maya Thompson and Dr. Samuel Reed, gathered for a formal meeting. Dr. Reed walked in with his usual confident demeanor, unaware of the gravity of the situation. He assumed it was a routine discussion and anticipated walking out unscathed, as he often did when questioned about his behavior. But this meeting was different, and Maya was prepared to address not only the incident, but the larger issues it symbolized. The meeting began with Mr. Thompson, the head of hospital management, briefly summarizing the situation. Dr. Reed, still unaware of Maya's true role as medical director, offered a defense of his actions. He claimed his behavior stemmed from the need to ensure efficiency and maintain high standards of patient care. It wasn't personal, he said, his tone calm but dismissive. I had to step in because the workflow was compromised. His posture was rigid, his words betraying his belief that his actions were justified. Maya sat quietly as he spoke, her hands resting calmly in her lap. She had anticipated his reaction and remained composed. When Mr. Thompson signaled it was her turn to speak, she straightened in her chair and met Dr. Reed's gaze. Her voice was steady but firm as she began. Dr. Reed, you didn't take the time to ask who I was, what my experience might be, or why I was performing those tasks. Instead, you made assumptions rooted in bias. Her words hung in the air, and the room fell silent. Dr. Reed's confident expression faltered, a flicker of doubt crossing his face as he tried to process what she was saying. Maya continued, her tone unwavering. "What you didn't know," she said, "is that I'm not just a nurse. I am the medical director of this hospital." The revelation left the room stunned. Dr. Reed's face flushed with embarrassment as the weight of her words sank in. He glanced at the leadership team, seeking support, but found none. The silence was deafening, and for the first time he appeared unsure of himself. Maya used the moment to address the larger issue. "This isn't about me or my title," she said. "It's about the culture we've allowed to persist in this hospital, a culture where assumptions about roles, status, and even race dictate how people are treated. Your behavior wasn't just unprofessional, it was dismissive and reflected a deeper problem." Dr. Reed shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his earlier confidence replaced with visible discomfort. He let out a shaky breath before responding. I see that I've made a mistake," he said, his voice quieter now, stripped of its usual bravado. "I apologize for the way I treated you, Dr. Thompson. It was never my intention to disrespect you, but I realize now that my actions were inappropriate and harmful." The apology was halting but sincere, and Maya acknowledged it with a small nod. However, she wasn't looking for personal vindication. Instead, her focus was on ensuring that this incident became a turning point for the hospital. She outlined specific recommendations, including mandatory bias training for all staff, regular evaluations of professional conduct, and clear reporting channels for instances of discrimination or mistreatment. The leadership team listened attentively, their expressions reflecting a shared understanding of the gravity of the situation. Mr. Thompson concluded the meeting by affirming the hospital's commitment to fostering a more inclusive and respectful culture. "We'll implement these measures immediately," he announced. "This is not just about addressing what happened today, but about ensuring that every member of our team feels valued and respected." Dr. Reed's transformation began that day. While he initially struggled to fully grasp the impact of his behavior, the meeting marked a turning point. He attended the newly implemented bias training sessions alongside his colleagues, not as a box-checking exercise, but with a genuine desire to learn. The incident had forced him to confront the biases he hadn't even realized he carried, and the damage they had caused. For Maya, the meeting was a step toward broader change. She hadn't sought to humiliate Dr. Reed, but to hold him accountable and address the systemic issues at play. By doing so, she set an example for the entire hospital, demonstrating that leadership isn't about asserting authority, but about creating an environment where everyone is treated with dignity and respect. The confrontation became a catalyst for institutional reform. Staff members began discussing the incident openly, recognizing its significance as a moment of reckoning. Conversations shifted from hushed complaints to constructive dialogue about improving workplace culture. Nurses, junior doctors, and even support staff felt more empowered to voice their concerns, knowing they had the backing of leaders like Maya. The changes didn't happen overnight, but the seeds of progress were sown. Maya's insistence on addressing the deeper issues transformed the hospital's culture, creating a more inclusive and equitable environment. And while Dr. Reed's journey towards self-awareness was just beginning, his willingness to learn and grow signaled that change was possible even for those who had been part of the problem. In the end, the meeting wasn't just about holding one person accountable. It was about setting a new standard for the hospital, one rooted in mutual respect, collaboration, and a commitment to equity. For Maya, it was a moment of triumph not for herself, but for the vision of a workplace where everyone, regardless of title or background, could thrive. Following the confrontation between Maya Thompson and Dr. Samuel Reed, the hospital leadership took swift action to address the systemic issues the incident had highlighted. Recognizing the need for meaningful reform, they implemented a series of policies aimed at fostering a culture of respect, equity, and inclusion. At the heart of these changes was the introduction of mandatory diversity and bias training for all staff members, from senior doctors to support personnel. The training sessions were designed to go beyond surface-level awareness, encouraging participants to examine their implicit biases and understand how these could influence their interactions and decision-making. Role-playing exercises, case studies, and open discussions became a standard part of the program, fostering empathy and collaboration among staff members who had previously operated in silos defined by hierarchy. In addition to the training, the hospital established formal channels for employees to report instances of discrimination, bias, or unprofessional behavior without fear of retaliation. Regular reviews of professional conduct were introduced, ensuring that the new standards of respect and accountability were upheld consistently. Maya's advocacy played a pivotal role in ensuring these changes weren't perceived as mere reactions to the incident, but as part of a broader commitment to creating a healthier workplace culture. Her focus remained on systemic change rather than personal retribution. By shifting the conversation from individual fault to institutional responsibility, she paved the way for long-term improvements. The impact of these reforms was soon evident. Staff at all levels reported feeling more valued and respected, with conversations around equity and inclusion becoming a regular part of the workplace dialogue. Maya's leadership had not only addressed the immediate issues, but it also laid the groundwork for a more collaborative and inclusive environment. Dr. Reed, who had been at the center of the controversy, embraced the opportunity to grow. He actively participated in the diversity training and began mentoring younger doctors, using his experience to advocate for teamwork and mutual respect. The changes marked a turning point for the hospital, demonstrating that one incident, handled with integrity and vision, could spark meaningful progress for an entire institution. The incident with Maya Thompson became a moment of reckoning for Dr. Samuel Reed. Confronted with the consequences of his behavior, he began to reflect on the patterns of arrogance and dismissiveness that had defined his interactions with staff. Recognizing the harm he had caused, Dr. Reed resolved to make meaningful changes, not only to rebuild trust, but also to become a better leader. He actively participated in the hospital's new diversity and bias training sessions, approaching them with a genuine desire to learn. These sessions opened his eyes to the impact of his actions and helped him understand how biases could unconsciously shape workplace dynamics. Dr. Reed also took steps to repair his relationships with the nurses and junior doctors who had long borne the brunt of his dismissiveness. He began seeking input from his colleagues, valuing their perspectives, and working collaboratively to improve patient care. Additionally, he took on a mentorship role, guiding younger doctors not only in medical expertise, but also in fostering respectful, team-eliminated relationships. Through consistent effort, Dr. Reed transformed his leadership style, earning the respect of his peers and contributing to the hospital's cultural shift toward inclusivity and collaboration. Maya Thompson's experience with Dr. Samuel Reed became a powerful catalyst for change far beyond the walls of her hospital. Recognizing the broader implications of what had transpired, Maya used the incident as an opportunity to advocate for racial and gender equity in healthcare. She began sharing her story at leadership conferences, medical schools, and healthcare summits, using her platform to address systemic biases that often went unchallenged in professional environments. In her speeches, Maya emphasized the importance of creating inclusive workplaces where individuals were judged by their skills and contributions, not their race, gender, or title. She spoke candidly about the challenges she had faced as a Black woman rising through the ranks of a hierarchical system, connecting her personal journey to the experiences of countless others in similar positions. Her authenticity and passion resonated with audiences, sparking conversations about equity and respect across the healthcare sector. At her hospital, the impact of her advocacy was immediate and transformative. Under her leadership, diversity and inclusion became core values embedded in the institution's policies and culture, Training programs, open forums, and mentorship opportunities encouraged staff at all levels to engage in meaningful dialogue and work collaboratively. Staff reported feeling more empowered and valued, and the improved morale translated into better patient care. The ripple effect of Maya's work extended to other hospitals and organizations. Inspired by her efforts, institutions began examining their own practices and implementing reforms to address biases and inequities. Healthcare leaders invited Maya to consult on initiatives designed to promote fairness, improve leadership accountability, and foster collaboration. Her ability to combine personal experience with actionable strategies made her a sought-out retriever for visualizing problems and improving reputation. For Maya, the work was never about personal recognition. She remained focused on her vision of a healthcare system where everyone, regardless of background, had the opportunity to thrive. Her humility, coupled with her determination to create a more equitable environment, left an indelible mark on the industry. Maya's legacy was one of quiet strength and transformative action. Through her leadership, she not only reshaped the culture of her own hospital, but inspired others to follow suit, ensuring that her efforts would benefit future generations of healthcare professionals and the patients they served.